Just to set the stage for our press briefing. In a few minutes, we will do a little bit of a show and tell. Most of the members of the media should already have a PDF copy of what it is we'll be showing on the screen. It involves the tracking of the hate group that has been involved in the 405 incident. Following that, we're going to ask Bishop Kenneth Olber to say a few words, and then LAPD Chief Michel Moore, and Brian T. Gulhuli, who's Special Agent in charge of Mission Services at the FBI Bureau here in Los Angeles. And then some reflections by Rabbi Marvin Heyer, our CEO, the founder and dean, and the guiding light of the Simon Wiesenthal Center for 45 years. And then we'll go to Q&A. My name is Rabbi Abraham Cooper. I'm the Associate Dean of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and I direct our global social action. There's really no reason to go over the words of Kanye West's unfortunate sustained attacks in our community and the impact it has had and may yet have on tens of millions of followers on social media. I will say that the Wiesenthal Center is today also calling upon Elon Musk to take the lead in making sure that his new company, Twitter, stops being a major portal for extremists and hate groups. And the Washington Post just did a story this morning that overnight there's already the testing of the waters by many bigots, racists, and anti-Semites. And in the current scenario of where we are in this world today, here in America, it's something we can't afford. The Simon Wiesenthal Center started 3 years ago a project called Digital Terrorism and Hate. And that's where we put most of our research capabilities on. What we've prepared for you this morning on the screen is to give you some background on a hate group which I think most organizations and media till now have not even named. Because why give them the free PR? Well, we believe that in many ways we've reached a tipping point on a lot of levels in the community while we've asked our leadership to share their perspective. But Goyim Defense League, Goyim in Hebrew, it just means nations of the world. Goyim is also can be used in a pejorative way. And this is a group that was founded in 2018. They've been active in at least 5 states: California, Colorado, Florida, New York, and Texas, with copycats in Illinois. And their primary activities have not been so much online, although they are active, but you might say more low-tech activities that include freeway banner drops, flyer distribution, and driving trucks with anti-Semitic slogans in heavily Jewish areas. This group was also responsible for many of the online attacks blaming Jews for COVID-19 and introducing the terms Holocaust and Jew flu. They first used the 405 freeway as a backdrop for their activities in September of 2020. And for those who know, the media did cover it, and the quote then was, "Honk if you know the Jews want a race war." 4 months ago, we had a press conference at the Cook County Jail. I'm glad it was a round trip. A serious place, and the reason we were there was that, and this is what they often do, they will tweak the flyer or the message in order to give it a local flavor. So when they did it in Chicagoland, they named Chief Schmitz, who's the Cook County Sheriff. They bestowed the honorific title of Jew. He's many things, but he is not of the Jewish faith. But it fit their narrative. And what we did is we went to the Cook County Jail in order to inform the public that the Goyim TV's a demonization of individuals and of groups continues afoot. Of course, everyone here saw the incredible sight of neo-Nazis and white supremacists Zeke-heiling to honor Kanye West, a black man, for his expressed hatred of the Jewish people. In addition to that, they've also presented a series of flyers that often focuses on quote-unquote Jewish control of the media, and more locally here as well, some of their sample flyers. Antifa is a Jewish militia. Every single person in the Federal Reserve is a Jew. And in the middle, you see the attack on Disney. So, and these are, in many cases, individuals have their names are named. And what we've all been struggling with across the board here is, we know, of course, the Simon Wiesenthal Center and its Museum of Tolerance were all about speech and exchange of ideas and differences in the marketplace of ideas, what involves social issues, economic science, etc. But what we've been experiencing and hearing from members of the Jewish community from coast to coast is they feel the threats. The reaction is not so much fear, but pure anger and a sense of helplessness. What can we do to try to turn things around? And so we're very grateful today for the speakers that are here. I also want to make special mention of our outgoing city councilman, Paul Koretz. If you just stand for a moment. Paul, in our community here in the West Side, and I think also from many of the members of the Jewish community in the La Brea area, he was there for us as a city councilman during the riots, during COVID-19, coming out late at night when hate crimes did take place. So we're very grateful for your activism and commitment on this issue, and we wish you well in the future. So thank you very much for coming. We also have top-tier folks from LAPD. The chief is going to introduce each of them in a moment. And I also want to recognize retired Captain Eric Davis, who's not only was captain in the LAPD, but the good news for us is he's now also a key presenter and facilitator at the Museum of Tolerance. So welcome on board. Rabbi Meir May, our executive director, is also here. And I'm sure before it's over, I'll get a couple of more names. I apologize in advance for anybody that we've missed. This morning there was a press conference in Chicago by two individuals in front of a sneaker store, shoe store, in which they launched an attack on the Jewish community in Chicago and defended the indefensible. In terms of the attacks of the Jews, and said Kanye is a victim. Kanye West is not a victim. And he's not someone who speaks for anyone. He's a social influencer. But we'd like to introduce you to the people who influence us, true leaders of our community, who are there with us and together with us, not only in time of crisis, but in terms of working together on issues to benefit all Angelenos and everyone here in the United States. So if I may ask our good friend, Bishop Kenneth C. Ulmer, who leads the Faithful Central Bible Church and who's an acknowledged interfaith leader around the globe, if he would come up and share some of his perspectives and thoughts this afternoon. Bishop Ulmer.
I really stand in the tradition of Rabbi Abraham Heschel and Dr. Martin Luther King. From a Los Angeles perspective, I stand in the tradition of Rabbi Harvey Fields and Dr. Chip Murray. But we stand as fellow pilgrims, often through the pain of hatred, the pain and the division, of anti-Semitism and anti-racial unity. And interestingly enough, as we stand in this museum, this temple of tolerance, we declare that we cannot tolerate hatred, terrorism, anti-Semitism, and anti-racial harmony. We stand as two communities who have known attack, who have known being ostracized and criticized, often merely for who we are. And yet we come to stand together. The Bible says that brothers are birthed and come forth in times of adversity. And this time we stand to denounce hatred, bigotry, racism, whether it comes from the street or from the stage. And we do declare that we can and we must overcome, but we can and we will only overcome together.
Thank you, Bishop Ulmer, one of the pillars of Los Angeles, California, and one of our mentors and leaders in multi-faith commitment and activity. I also want to acknowledge the person who's in charge of this little facility called the Museum of Tolerance and the 7.5 million people who come through. I think we have about 500 or 600 young people throughout the museum in real time. Liebe Geft is here, Rabbi Yonah Bookstein, and many others who've come out. And we're so grateful to the community that in the post-COVID era, we're beginning to see the numbers come back. We're beginning to reclaim our responsibility to be that safe public location where we can debate real issues and to stand for personal responsibility and critical thinking. That is what we teach here every day, not just the students. That's a perspective we also share with law enforcement. Chief Michel Moore is a hero to the Jewish community here in Los Angeles. It's no secret that as far as our community is concerned, it was the LAPD that was our singular lifeline during these most difficult and trying times for us, and of course for the LAPD. Michel Moore has earned our trust, and our relationships continue to run deep with law enforcement. And also, he's an experienced hand, unfortunately, when it comes to the issue of hate crimes. Every single year since 1993, when the FBI first started taking statistics, the #1 target of race-based hate crimes in the United States are blacks, and the #1 target of religious-based hate crimes in the United States are Jews. And as both of our communities play our role here in Los Angeles, not surprised that we continue to be targets of hate. What we do about it, obviously, that's the total commitment of the Museum of Tolerance, but without law enforcement to be there, to understand our needs and to have our back, we wouldn't be able to survive as on the level that this community has thrived. So we're asking Chief Moore to take a few minutes and to scope out for all of us the perspective of the LAPD on groups like this particular one and on the implications of the level of anxiety and hatred that unfortunately is characterizing life today in Southern California. Chief Moore.
Rabbi Cooper, thank you, and we stand with you. I am joined here today by a number of my senior management team, leadership team of LAPD, Deputy Chief Blake Chow from the Commanding Officer of West Bureau. He oversees essentially the western portion of the city. Commander Craig Valenzuela as the Assistant Commanding Officer for the Valley. So essentially the policing of the city north of Mulholland, as I like to say, the San Fernando Valley itself. I've also have Officer Gabriel Cohen, who works out of my office, the Office of Chief of Police for our community outreach and engagement. Bob Rothman, who's a well-known individual also within our Jewish community. And I stand here in this wonderful location, a place that has been a home for law enforcement for more than 3 decades, to talk about tolerance, to talk about the history of the injustices between people, tribes, if you will, of individuals who develop hate and are willing to create such mayhem and death and destruction, destroy their very existence over a perceived difference, something defined by a faith or a skin color or a gender or orientation. It's a place where every Los Angeles police officer comes to learn about the history of our existence, and more recently, our history here in the United States and the injustices that have flowed, and the role that law enforcement has played in that. The ugly role at times where our efforts have been not just to allow, but at other times facilitate or author the racism that the bishop mentions, the biases, prejudices that as the lead, most visible form of government, law enforcement has played that hand. But also a place that has shown us that the reforms to law enforcement and the acknowledgement of our past and our commitment to a future and present day and future values of each individual and their rights to exist and the desire for equity and inclusion is also within our power. So this is a great place to be, and it's one, though, that today I'm sorrowful to be here. I'm going to talk about a few moments, spend a few moments on where we're at in regards to hate crime, specifically bias, anti-Semitic hate, and then I'll speak also about this extremist group that was mentioned and its role as part of the larger movement occurring across the United States. I'm also joined here today by a partner, an important one, and that is Brian Gilhogy from the FBI and his team that is here as a special agent in charge here in the LA office. Federal partners that pursue hate crime investigations, that stand with us continually in our collective efforts in law enforcement to stand and say, not here and not now. And those that engage in hate crimes will be prosecuted with the U.S. Attorney, and when not there, by a district attorney, and when not there because of statutes, by the city attorney. But make no mistake, if you commit a hate crime in the city, we will join with every law enforcement agency and every prosecutor possible to hold that individual responsible. Year to date, we have seen 562 hate crimes in the city. That is an increase, double-digit increase of 12% from just last year. Most startling is when we go back to 2020, where that's a 71% increase in the number of hate crimes in this city. Anti-Jewish biases, hate crimes against Jewish people are up also. 76 anti-Jewish bias crimes this year. That's a 9% increase from last year and a 77% increase. So on par, in fact, at a higher rate than we're seeing overall hate crimes. And hate crimes in Los Angeles, much as we're seeing across the state and across this country, are at decades high. When we look at the underlying influences of that, we recognize that they're drivers of that. But before we get to that, I want to say that our efforts is not just the awareness of these crimes, but to investigate each one. And to investigate and pursue and identify those responsible for these crimes and hold them accountable. Also, though, we pay close attention to instances, hate instances that do not amount to a crime by our system of government, hate speech, if you will. Acts that do not commit a crime, but we believe are precursors to individuals who engage in hate. And we see those instances also increasing in this city from year over year, essentially on par and on pace with the instances of increase of hate. So when we look at precursors, if you will, the precursors are a fertile ground of individuals that oftentimes, and over a period of time, will escalate their actions into hate, which is why it's so important that all Evangelinos report to us instances of hate. They may feel that it's a slight, that it's a rude, crude, ignorant individual, and that law enforcement's too busy to know about that. We are not. We need to understand and identify those that espouse hate, because while they may not be committing a crime, what is allowed to be said eventually is allowed to be done. Is that what is thought becomes a word and then becomes an action. And so that's why this department so aggressively wants to hear and will investigate those instances as allowed by law and as provided by the law. Now, what's driving this? Well, certainly the pandemic, the stress, the isolation, the depression has had a role of establishing a fertile ground. Social media, however, in my belief, is far more responsible than the COVID pandemic. And let me be clear on that. This is a vehicle of misinformation, of disinformation, of rhetoric, of conspiracy theorists, as a ground that speaks to people who are isolated, who are disenfranchised, who suffer from mental health and mental illness. And the authors of this are the same authors of hate that we saw less than 100 years ago in Nazi Germany. Make no mistake about it. The authors of extremist groups, and this is on both sides, the far right and the far left, they eventually all meet together with a madness that's effort is to have us hate one another, to destroy us from within. Their target is this democracy. Their target is to vilify identities within our existence of this great experiment and to disable it by causing us to be unwilling to work together and to find tolerance and inclusion and an ability to work together. So what is LAPD doing about this? This organization and others, this hate group, this extremist group, whether it be anti-Semitic, anti-Black, anti-Hispanic, anti-Asian, anti-LGBTQ, whatever those extreme views are that separate and attack, even verbally, is to identify those groups, to understand their origins, to watch and carefully monitor and aggressively prosecute when they cross a line that makes their actions a crime. That collection of information is done lawfully, it's done within the Constitution, because frankly, it's not that difficult. These groups operate in open places. They want to be seen and heard. They want to have their identity. Many times they represent as many as one person, but their view spreads like wildfire. And you would think that they are the giant. Well, in reality, I'm here to tell you that those extremist views do not represent the America I know, and they certainly don't represent the Los Angeles I know. And for us, as a community, we must recognize that we need information regarding these groups, and LAPD, working with our FBI and other law enforcement partners, maintain awareness. But I want to also thank the Simon Wiesenthal Center, the ADL, the Jewish Federation, small community groups that also collect and track and understand the actions of these extremists. Going forward, we can work for a better America, for a better Los Angeles, by ensuring consequences of those who engage in hate when they cross a line of criminality. But also, we need to look as a country in regards to the use of social media as how it has become a knife, how it has become a weapon, and it is undermining the very stability of this great nation. And while our forefathers always imagined a courtyard, a square where one could express one's view, and a freedom to do so, we must also recognize that there's limits to that expression. And when does social media become the person yelling in an auditorium that there's a fire? And if it can't be addressed, the conspiracy that undermines the faith and confidence in a government and a faith and confidence in the ability to protect all of its communities and all of its citizens and all of the identities of those within that. Know as I close that we stand with you, and we'll stand and announce when we can arrests and prosecutions for those that cross that line. And before that, though, we're also mindful of working with our communities to identify that a person distributing a flyer, while wrong and hateful and distasteful, that we're watching to do everything we can with our city attorney and others to find ways of building conspiracy charges, of lawful matters of harassment, of criminal threats, of terrorist threats, and we'll aggressively pursue that. So I'll say for those individuals who believe they can operate with impunity, that they're protected by this greatest democracy as they try to tear it down, that we're going to work and do our very best to protect that democracy. Because as Winston Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government, except when you consider all the others. And we're going to protect it in law enforcement. And I'm confident with this group and our friendships and cooperative partnerships with Simon Wiesenthal and other organizations.
On behalf of the men and women of the FBI, I want to thank Rabbi Cooper and his staff, as well as our law enforcement colleagues, for your partnership and shared objective of combating crimes against the Jewish people. Crimes fueled by anti-Semitic hate cannot be tolerated. And the FBI is committed to preventing these crimes, including acts of terror and violations of civil liberties. No Jewish community member should have to experience being targeted with the threat of violence where they live, where they work, or where they pray. Unfortunately, we have seen violence targeting the Jewish community specifically and consistently across the country, including here in Southern California at the North Valley Jewish Community Center, at a Poway synagogue near San Diego. We all remember the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh 4 years ago. The Jewish community has had to adjust to this environment and has met the challenge. They took the initiative, focused on increasing safety, and have conducted site assessments and training of this content, as well as building relationships with law enforcement professionals. As our partners here in the Los Angeles area, you are our eyes and ears. We rely on your unique experiences to inform our investigations. As we lean on you, know that we are here to reciprocate by sharing information, particularly if there's indication of a specific threat. If you don't have a point of contact, call us at the FBI. We will ensure that your phone call will be taken care of, and that if you report acts of violence, we will act upon them. Last year, the FBI redoubled its efforts to encourage the public to report hate crimes by launching a nationwide hate crimes ad campaign in more than 24 languages. We ask that anyone listening who believes they have been victimized by hate crime reach out to us. And you can call us at 1-800-CALL-FBI or submit tips online at tips.fbi.gov. The painful reality is that we have to anticipate that the Jewish community will continue to be targeted by offensive speech and violence motivated by hate. But our continued engagement with Jewish leaders, as well as local law enforcement collaboration, puts us in the best position to ensure the security and safety of this valued community. Thank you.
Thank you, Special Agent. Our next speaker really needs no introduction. He's the guiding light, the founder, CEO, and Dean of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and the entire concept of a Museum of Tolerance, along with many other amazing initiatives, trace back to Rabbi Marvin Heyer. I just want to take an additional moment because he's put together an amazing team of people. We very rarely talk about them necessarily, but we have Rick Trank, who directs our media department, and an Oscar winner is working, I think, on our 17th or 18th documentary right now, and someone who's committed his creativity in his life to this institution. Michelle Alkin, many of you in the media know, she heads up our communications effort, and as you can imagine, with the Kanye West debacle evolving and the calls coming in from the public as well as from media, she and her top flight staff, deserve our gratitude. So I want to acknowledge and thank each and every one of them. Rabbi Heyer serves as also our historic bridge back to the namesake of this institution, Simon Wiesenthal, who was an architect before the Second World War. Together with his wife, during the Holocaust, they lost 89 members of their family. If the U.S. Army had come 5 or 6 days later to Mauthausen concentration camp in Austria in 1945, Wiesenthal would have been dead. He couldn't even stand at the time. He was saved by American soldiers back then. And Rabbi Heyer is the person who convinced him to give his name to an idea. And he's the person who's put meat on the bones for 4.5 decades. So we've asked on this occasion for Rabbi Heyer to share some perspective, and then we'll go to your Q&A.
Thank you very much. I would say I still remember we went to Vienna to ask Mr. Wiesenthal to give us his name, Creation Simon Wiesenthal Center. He said that we should meet at the Intercontinental Hotel. We met at the Intercontinental Hotel, and I was unprepared for what happened. We sat there, and if you think that I'm speaking loud, imagine if I was speaking with a much more that people would be able to hear me a block away. That's the way he spoke to me. And he saw that I was uncomfortable because I kept looking, and so he said to me, Rabbi Heyer, I think I know you are wondering why I'm speaking loud. Isn't that true? I said, yes. He says, because see the people sitting around here? Many of them, they're in their 70s. Take a look. In their 80s. What do you think they were doing during the Second World War? And what were we doing in the 6 concentration camps that I went from concentration camp to concentration camp, and then having been told after the war I lost 89 members of my family. what do you think these people in their 80s and late 70s were doing? He says, I want to tell them the world has changed. You now have to speak in silence, because if you open your mouth and speak loudly, I will come right over to you in this hotel and say, where were you during the Second World War, and what was your name? That's why he says they're speaking. They hear that I'm telling them the world has changed. And why am I telling you this story? Tried to convince him afterwards. Simon moved to the United States. So many people will respect you there. And the center that we create to be easier for you. You're living, let's say, in New York or LA, rather than living in Vienna. He said, no. Rabbi Hayek, I will live the rest of my life where the Nazis live. And they still live in Vienna. And I want them to know it will never again happen. We will not allow it. Why am I telling you this story? Because I believe honestly, given what has happened here in the United States, if Simon Wiesenthal was alive today, he would move to New York or Los Angeles. You know why? Because the hate is in the greatest democracy that this planet has ever known, right here in the United States of America. And Simon Wiesenthal would not want to live in Vienna when all the hate is right here in this country, which is unbelievable. Simon used to say, this is what he would say. He'd tell me, there's no elevator to success. You have to take the stairs. Freedom is not a gift from heaven. It's something you have to fight for each and every day. So let's fight. Let's fight the haters. Let them know that if they think the United States of America, the greatest democracy ever, that we're going to allow to go back to the time of fascism, back to the time of 1933 to 45, it will never happen. If anyone will come to an end, it will be the haters, not the freedom lovers.
Thank you, Rabbi. Well, the members of the media have been extremely patient. The way we'll set it up is just identify who you are. You can direct your question initially to any of the speakers, and if anyone else wants to weigh in, they'll be open to do so.
Thank
yes,
you, Rabbi, for Chief Moore. Good afternoon, Chief. Can you tell us the status of the investigation on the banners on the 405 and where you're at with that right now? And then I have a follow-up.
Okay, so we've had banner events on the 23rd, last Saturday. There was followed by a counter protest on Monday of a much smaller group. Both groups were contacted by the California Highway Patrol. The identity of the first group was reference to the group that Rabbi Cooper spoke about earlier. You'll notice I'm not adding names to this. I don't believe that they deserve it. That's what they're looking for. Neither of those instances involved a crime. The La Brea and the 405 has become, with those most recent instances, if you will, a notable place. So we're monitoring that closely. Deputy Chief Chow has patrols on that portion of the area for us to monitor anyone that would go there and try to copycat that hateful act in regards to the banners that were dropped. I am encouraged that there were voices that countered that, but so that I'm clear, there's those events, while they are disgusting and distasteful and rejected by the vast majority of Angelenos, they did not commit a crime in and of just simply hanging the banner. The banners will not be allowed to remain on overpasses, yet the current state of the law, which prohibits hanging of banners, is written in a manner that requires those banners. They're prohibited when they advertise or promote a product or a particular commercialization. We're looking and working with our city attorney as well as California Transportation Department to understand why that is and how that can be changed, recognizing that many groups and many individuals promote their various ideologies from freeway overpasses, and there's been some marriage proposals, I understand.
Other than you not naming these groups, are you confident in knowing that all of these specific targeted hate crimes are being done by the same group of individuals?
We believe that the flyer drops, which have been in the Brentwood and Century City area, which has been occurring now for about 8+ months on occasion, while they're in those communities, they've not targeted specific locations on a recurring basis. They've been spread across those larger communities. We do believe that that's associated with the same group. We think it's a small cell. We think we have, I won't go to the extent of us identifying who they are publicly, because they haven't committed a crime to this point, but we're very much working with our law enforcement partners in this region. I don't believe that they're in the Los Angeles basin or area. I think that they're operating from regions around the city of Los Angeles and traveling here. And we're working with our affiliated law enforcement agencies in the region of Southern California to ensure that they're aware of their existence and that they're monitoring their actions there should they be committing crimes or involved in other criminal activity in those jurisdictions.
So to be clear, these are outsiders coming in.
To this point, the information that our investigations developed is that these are individuals that were not residing in Los Angeles city, that they were in and from this area, this region of Southern California.
Finally, how difficult is it to investigate and prosecute a hate crime?
It's not difficult what we rely upon in investigating hate crimes is the cooperation of the community in which we serve and are protecting. Secondly, is good cooperation and partnerships with our law enforcement partners to develop tips and leads and clues to identify those persons, build a case, build the evidence that they committed a crime and that crime was motivated by hate, and that is subject to either a federal hate crime statute or a state hate crime statute. California has very strong state hate crime statutes. We work immediately on initiation of these investigations with the appropriate filing prosecuting agency, whether it be the U.S. Attorney, the District Attorney, or the City Attorney, and we build those cases and we prosecute those cases, and we seek the maximum application of the criminal justice system as far as punishment. We believe that these hate crimes are much like terrorist acts, that while they may be few in numbers when you look at the overall population of 4 million in the city of Los Angeles, 10 million in the county of Los Angeles, and we're talking about hundreds of crimes. We believe that they have a disproportionate impact, as we know, within the Jewish community and with every community. The African American community, the Latino community, the Asian Pacific community, the LGBTQ community. A single incident can have a devastating impact on a sense of safety and security of the much larger, which is why those enhancements exist, and which is why law enforcement on a hate crime that may be vandalism or property only will investigate it as fully and with much zeal as if it was a murder or a robbery or a other crime of violence. We see hate crimes as crimes of violence.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just also to give a little bit more perspective, we live, because of social media, every local action has almost immediate worldwide impact. And every global development, especially in a city like LA, which is the second city for almost every national and ethnic group in the world, anything global is local, everything local is global. And so you heard already Elon Musk's name mentioned. We have the FBI here, we have the LAPD here. Being able to understand the full extent of the threats and trying to co-opt some of those threats and knowing who all the players, much more complicated than it once was because of the instantaneous power of social media. So even if these folks do everything right, we know there's no guarantee. And I think they're both correct to emphasize the role of civil society and of organizations like the Wiesenthal Center and others to do the monitoring on behalf of the various communities, minorities. In our case, it's not just the Jewish community that we look at in terms of online activity, but across the board, whether it's Islamophobia, anti-Black, and especially during the lurid conspiracy theories of COVID, the extremists just took classic anti-Semitic conspiracies, pulled those words out, and inserted Chinese or Asian. So we understood that from the get-go, and yet those lurid assertions led to violent attacks, and I think in at least 1 or 2 cases, people in the Asian American community were killed over fears of the COVID-19.
Do you feel like, sir, on behalf of the Jewish community, do you feel like the community, with regard to race relations and anti-hate, do you feel like the community gets like one step ahead and you feel like you're making a little progress and then something like this happens and it just takes you way back?
Well, I think across the board, whatever the color of your skin, with parents and grandparents, what do we want for our families and our kids? Them to be able to thrive, be able to go to the market, come home in one piece, and to be shielded from people who have an agenda to spread hate and violence. I think if there is a fear that's overhanging all of us, is, just before the press conference, learning about what happened in San Francisco to Nancy Pelosi's husband, the level of violence, the shootings. I have to report to you that on TikTok, there are subgroups on TikTok that endorse school shootings. And so that person may be in Vienna, Austria, as there was a case a few weeks ago, but the underbelly of social media is really out of control. It's horrific and cannot be solved by law enforcement. It can be solved by honest leadership from the big players in Silicon Valley and social media.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to ask our wonderful speakers who've come out, if they stay a little bit longer. Anybody who needs a one-on-one is welcome to do so. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for your concerns.